You know, the thing I like about Tucker Carlson is he's such an independent thinker. This guy's not. This guy, he's not.
It's
he's
tough
not
for a
some
couple
type
of weeks before an election, Sam.
He's not. He's not some type
months.
of party shill. This guy, and here he is. Want to make it clear, just in case you didn't get the message. You've been watching Tucker Carlson. You've been bathing in all his right-wing populism. He just wants to make it absolutely clear where the home for you folks who want to fight the elites is. Forget for a moment the 200 judges who have been put on the federal judiciary, who I guarantee you, in every single opportunity they have to rule in favor of corporations, big money, to strip individuals for rights of redress against corporations, to strip workers and consumers and citizens of any type of protections they have in our society. They will rule every time in favor of those moneyed interests that Tucker Carlson bemoans.
And by the way, when they rule the right way, sorry, you were loading up vacationing. Where is he vacationing? I'm sorry.
As he goes in between his 3 or 4 abodes, waiting for his parents to die so he can become a multi. I mean, he's probably already a multimillionaire. But,
yeah, I think he's doing.
But I'd be like 100 a millionaire or whatever you call that. Here he is. He's going to tell you now, the only institution, as flawed as it is, that will protect you and your interests against all of these corporations and these elites.
But to remind the Republican Party that it is our only shield. Yes, the Republican Party, flawed and infuriating though it often is, the fact remains the GOP is the only institution still open to the rest of us, to Americans who want to live as they did just 15 years ago, quietly, productively, without being harassed and harangued by self-righteous lunatics who mean them harm, and they do. If you want to be left alone to do your job and raise your family in this country, you will need a protector. That protector must be the Republican Party. There are no other options, but it must be a very different kind of Republican Party. Keep in mind, we're getting a new Republican Party no matter what happens. Even now, vultures wait just off stage to swoop in and claim the GOP for themselves once Donald Trump is gone.
The imagery there, right? And the idea of like the haranguing and the harassing that you're getting, right? Like, this isn't his left-wing populism anymore. It is just like, it is completely cultural, And in fact, that's what, I mean, this isn't right-wing populism. All the right-wing populism is this cultural war. It's all the culture fight. And he can talk about.
That's interesting, though, the way he's pivoting on it, because I would draw some distinctions between the aggressive cultural warfare that he usually does overtly, and Bannon and everybody else. This sort of like actually getting back to live in peace, leave you alone, is weirdly analogous to what Biden's offering in terms of how Biden is framing getting back to quote unquote normal. It's like where you're drawing normal. And it's also weird that
but what is it?
That's like a libertarian signal in a way. But that's very odd.
The haranguing and harassing by the
that's you need to go and crush people on the streets. I mean, we've already talked about that. That's been his main thing.
What is the haranguing and harassment that people are getting now? This isn't, I'll tell you why it's not libertarian, because it's not government overreach he's complaining about. I mean, what is the haranguing, harassing he's talking about? He's talking about
like
women asserting themselves in the workplace, insofar as like, Me Too stuff. He's talking about Black people asserting themselves and saying like, hey, we don't want to be occupied. We don't want to be policed by an occupying force.
But remember the origins, but again, this is where it all merges, because you go back to the origins of libertarian politics. That was substantively what they were complaining about too.
Yes, but
the federal government is
he's
coming.
Not even pretending to dress up.
Yeah.
Because the federal government is not harassing them, right? It's not like a neo-Confederate argument. It's strictly a cultural one.
We played a video of him like a year ago where he's like, who's going to stand up for us if Nike is going to give Kaepernick a commercial? Like fundamentally, all this is they're mad at like the elites in boardrooms who are saying, actually, it makes better financial sense for our business to not be racist. Like that's the problem he has with the elites now. And I mean, that's what the IDW, I think that's the sentiment it cultivates.
And here he is again, like this is Tucker Carlson again. And remember, he's made the argument that it's about harassing and haranguing. And so now he's layering in some other measure of economic insecurity, supposedly, which is, listen to what Tucker Carlson says here.
Country. They are our hope for the future, our only hope. And yet both parties have shamelessly abandoned them. Middle-class families have no national spokesman. They have no lobby in Washington. Republicans pretend to be their champion. You know by now that they are not. Instead of improving the lives of their voters, the party feeds them a steady diet of mindless symbolic victories, partisan junk food designed to make them feel full even as they waste away. Who cares how many Benghazi hearings we have? We're supposed to care. Why should we? How did Peter Strzok's text messages become more important than saving American jobs from foreign nationals who are taking them? It is lunacy. We fall for it every time. And to the extent this show has participated in it, we apologize with deepest sincerity.
Oh, God.
Because meanwhile, as we're talking about things that don't matter, life for the dwindling American middle class has become steadily worse. Suddenly there are junkies living in your park. Your nephew just died of a fentanyl overdose. And saddest of all, and who hasn't thought this, you've realized that your children will never be as successful as you are. The American dream died with your generation. As all of this happened, Democrats laughed because it served their interests. Republicans basically ignored it, and that cannot continue. The only political movements that endure are the ones that make their voters stronger. So how does this change? Can Republican office holders change their party? Yes, they can. We just have to make them. These are not, by and large, evil people. Mike Braun is not an evil person. Despite the way they talk, they're not secretly working for the other side. Most of them are just empty, sad people. And politics is the way they fill the yawning void inside where a personal life should be. They're pleasers. They're searching for the approval of strangers. Our job is to give them clear instructions about what we want. We do that by voting and by making noise. They will not lead us. We know that now. They've refused to. We have to lead. And when we do, they will follow. Johnny Burke is the executive.
Like, what?
There's a lot being conflated there.
Oh, my gosh. And
there is so much being conflated there.
And what is also fascinating about this is that there is what concrete proposals is he highlighting at any given time that would in any way empower the people he's talking about?
Well, in the past, and it's really interesting, and I don't watch Tucker all the time, or even actually, I mean, honestly, ever. I just watch these clips. But I noticed in outside of the, further away from the election, he would occasionally talk about breaking up an Amazon.
Right.
Or, there needs to be some some top marginal tax increases. And it's very interesting that the closer that the rubber hits the road, the way less specific you can be, because none of those things are happening. Yes, like Josh Hawley's got some decent legislation on a few things or whatever, but with regards to Amazon specifically or tech monopolies. But the bottom line is that none of this stuff is coming from the Trump administration, including when I thought at the beginning of COVID.
And none's coming, frankly, from the Republican Party. Yes, there are one or two
individuals, people working on this or that issue. But Mitch McConnell's going to shepherd an antitrust agenda through. I mean, come on, let's be serious. So it needs to be, and then the other part that's interesting is that is a one-to-one. I mean, Bill Fletcher put it much more historically and entirely differently last night. But yes, the Democratic leadership in corporate America will show up in kente cloth and present symbolic nonsense without actual material accomplishments. Yes, that's exactly right. I mean, the difference being is that in the Republicans' case, there is a part of the base of the party. There is a part of the party that's getting catered to, and that's the donor class. And I would argue with actually Democrats as well. But it's the clarifying thing to me, at least, about the right-wing populism thing. And there's a lot of other stuff to set aside, and there's different things that we could debate. But the bottom line is like, if you don't have an understanding or a framework of conflict between capital and labor, then everything else to me really is just window dressing, to the point where the actual concrete examples that these guys can marshal of not having strict supply side positions are a couple of decent positions on antitrust, trade positions that are actually, if you dig into them, potentially even worse, because they're basically just bilateral agreements that drive down standards potentially even more than the WTO frameworks. And then some stuff that, like, it's good. Raise top marginal rates. That's Clinton Gore 92. It's not really that exciting, guys.
Exactly.
And nothing about labor unions.
And
that is such a dividing line.
Yes, of course. And those marginal, Joe Biden was out there yesterday saying, look, to his donors, like, I'm going to raise corporate rates to 7% less than they were before Donald Trump lowered them.
That's right.
So, I mean, this is the way that it creeps down. Like, Bill Clinton did the same thing.
Yep.
He lowered that, he took the Reagan gave us the capital gains tax decoupled from income tax. And then Clinton came in, he's like, I'm going to raise those. Okay. But you're still, 10 years, you're still significantly less on those taxes than you were 10 years ago in this country. And that's, what Biden's going to do. And the idea of, like, we drop them 15 points and then we raise them 7. And look at that. I'm raising the marginal tax rates. Like, give me a number and, then and make that confiscatory at, for people over, I don't know, making $5 million a year. I want, 90 cents on the dollar after that.
Absolutely. And
whatever,
that's, and
4 million, 3 million, whatever the number is. I don't care.
And it's yeah, I mean, and as Dustin Guastalo, I always recommend people read. I mean, he's like, look, if you absolutely, and I think it is important to think through these things clearly. Like, Steve Bannon represents something different in terms of a pitch and argument than Mitch McConnell. But if you push any of these folks like Bannon on labor unions, they sound like country club Republicans. And that is just because, to me, unions are not only a question of this or that policy or rate. It's a question of reorienting power away from capital to labor. And that is, there might be a socially moderate person who supports that. I'd be quick to add. There might be people who are like, yeah, I'm pro-choice and so on, but I'm not like super invested in, various cultural controversies. Yes, that exists. But a right-wing version of that, and that's why every single, Tucker segment, what does he do? He outlines problems and then he pivots to immigration. Which, again, it's not even just that it's morally wrong. It's also that that is actually the direct inhibitor of being able to build and renew a mass base of organizing, which is definitionally multi-identity. That's not even a moral statement. It's just literal order of operations.